Alrighty, so all the way from Colorado Springs, Colorado, it's the Matt Allner Show. How you doing, Matt?
Doing great,
Hey, I've
Joe.
got to
Thanks for
I've got
having
to
me
do
on.
you. Well, you're welcome. Thanks for coming on here. Let me just talk a little bit about Matt here. You've got quite a resume as well. You started out well. It sounds like, according to this, you started out in 2015 with your ministry work, Call the Lord. Um, Now you give talks primarily on families, on family and marriage, and how they're being attacked today, which is like the such a great subject. Let's see what else it says here. You were working at NASA for a while too. Is that correct?
I was a graduate researcher and was working as a non-employee with directly with NASA. It's kind of hard to explain. I wasn't employed with them,
Okay.
but I was doing research in grad school and then worked professionally just doing independent research that supported human exploration efforts to Mars and beyond. So stuff hopefully I'll live long enough to maybe see the roots of my work.
Okay.
We'll
That's pretty
see.
amazing stuff. But you've been involved in so many things here.
Yeah.
It's a DARE program for kids, elementary students, keeping them out of drugs and alcohol. Um, you've done a lot of speaking to youth and young adults, it sounds like. You're on the Catholic Speakers Tour or whatever it's called. Um, so, you've been around the block a little bit. We are really excited that you can speak to us here with this mini conference here. And of course, the theme again is prayer, hope, and don't worry. Be kind of interested to see, how, your perspective on that and your, what you can bring in encouragement and stuff to people that are listening right now. So I'm just going to throw it to you, and I'm going to sit. I want to hear it.
Well, I haven't played catch with my son for baseball yet, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to catch it, Joe, but I'll do my best. I first of all, I want to just give a shout out to Alan and Bill. Their talks were amazing, very different from different perspectives of the situations that are going on, and of course, making this relevant to listeners that are listening with what's going on right now, what we're all going through is so important. It's such an uncertain time, and that was essentially the research that I did for NASA was how to deal with uncertainties, and we were doing group dynamic studies, how teams function and leadership functions, and what the best dynamics would be for teams and leadership, and looking for crews to go to Mars. But, things we haven't done, and it's not to bring the NASA stuff into the picture on this, but what's different about it is that it's not going to be a round trip mission. A lot of people think it will, and the reality is as of right now, it still won't. It's a one-way trip, and that's a different dynamic. I mean, when you know you're not going to come home back to Earth, it rewires you once the rocket fires and you're on your way. And so, there were some interesting studies within NASA that led to the bigger questions of, we've got to talk about some things that are a little uncomfortable that we haven't been talking about for several decades now, and we're all kind of doing that right now in our own homes. So it's almost comical. I was doing this research for NASA, and then it becomes something that I can help myself, my marriage, and my family with, and yet now that I'm actually in this same boat as everyone else, so to speak, this there's stresses that are real, and there's uncertainties that are real, and everyone's trying to work through them in different ways. And you can kind of see that when you go out to the grocery stores, when you go out to the gas stations. For me, being a business owner in an essential business, I've seen dynamics in neighborhoods just working that I haven't seen since I've started my business, and it's been very encouraging. I've seen some really great. I've seen 99% great things and 1% bad things out there as far as people's actions and interactions. So,
Hey,
um,
hey,
you know,
Matt, can I
yes,
ask you a quick question here? Sorry.
you
Um,
bet.
you give those talks on the family and everything connected with that.
Mhm.
How, can I just ask you this with the coronavirus and all that? And isn't this putting a tremendous amount of stress on families today and on the marriage? I hear that the suicide rate is up, child abuse is up, domestic violence. All of these problems are kind of like boiling over. There's bankruptcies. People are not getting paid. How many people do we know that aren't receiving a paycheck right now? Uh, w-
Yeah.
would you agree that this is like really putting a stress on the family?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, personally speaking, our family has done very, very well. I'm very proud of my wife and our children, especially our children. They have just been tremendous. I mean, tremendous help at home. We have a 7-month-old baby, and so they have just really helped us where we've needed to. My wife and I are both in essential businesses. She's a nurse and I'm a contractor, so we've been working, and we've been able to trade shifts, so one of us is always home, but. It's not easy, and we hear stories of what other people are going through, and so one, we feel very blessed and fortunate that we're not maybe struggling as much as other people, and we're praying for them. But yeah, the stress on the family is difficult, and you kind of opened with the emphasis on the fact that I talk a lot about marriages and about family. I saw so many things as a teacher teaching in the classroom. I saw the failure of leadership in the home. And I don't mean any disrespect to any women that are listening, but there's a huge leadership responsibility that's given, and it's biblical, to men. You go all the way back to the first sin, and everyone thinks it was when Adam and Eve ate the apple from the tree, but really the first sin was Adam's lack of leadership. He stood right alongside his wife as he was being tempted by Satan, and he let her eat the apple. He didn't intervene. He didn't confront Satan. And so in our marriages, we as men have to recognize things that are maybe attacking us through our spouses, through our children, and we need to take that stance and step in. It's, again, this isn't a blame game, but it's more just an evaluation of conscience. What is our role? God designed men and women to be different, and our society has just confused people with the definition and role, to the point now where we have a reversal trend taking place that is just so not natural for raising children in a very healthy way. And it's not that it can't be done other ways, but again, are we going to keep defying God and what God's asked us to do? Are we going to be respectful and not submissive, but obedient to what He's asked us to do? Kent's going to be putting some pictures up throughout my talk that are kind of prompts as I go through, and I just like to share a little bit with you some things I've really reflected on, as I've been painting houses and installing trim and doing all sorts of things we've been doing over the last 6 weeks. It's funny when it's quiet how much God speaks to me, and He's really pressed upon me the story of Exodus, specifically the 10th plague and the Passover, and then of course the celebration of the Passover and the Last Supper with Jesus, and just some lessons learned and how relevant they are to what we're going through right now. Ken, if you can put the picture back up of Moses and the burning bush, and we'll kind of move forward a little bit in sequence of some of those pictures that would kind of help the audience with a visual. So in the book of Exodus, the first thing I want to kind of reference is social distancing. We had an image that was up a bit ago. It showed this person in the center of a circle and everyone keeping their 6-foot distance. You go to the grocery stores, you got your arrows down the aisle. Some people are following them, some people aren't. But for the most part, I've been seeing people being very respectful, letting other people go first and being careful to, not bump into each other. I've really thought a lot about this distancing, and granted, social distancing is for viral concerns, but I just want to bring up a lot of the distancing that was mentioned in the Bible and how interesting it was. So going back to the book of Exodus, you have the Israelites. They slowly over time were being more and more distance from God. I'm not a theology expert. I know what I know, and some days it's more than others. But from my understanding, the Israelites had started slowly falling away from practicing their faith. I believe Alan referenced it pretty well in his talk about how much time we give daily to God. He mentioned 5 to 10 minutes. I was challenged with that question about 6 years ago, and I added it up, and I was giving maybe a minute or two, and that was an occasional prayer before dinner with my family, and then maybe a nighttime prayer before bed, and I realized I needed to do more and challenge myself to start praying at least 15 minutes a day. And then things just, I can't begin to tell you what happened, but that's how my business has started, and where I'm at today because of it. But it grew, that spending that, that time with God, giving him more of that time, of the 24 hours a day he's given me to breathe. But the Israelites were distancing themselves from God, and then Pharaoh was just working them like dogs, was increasing their quotas, and then got to a point where they didn't even provide them the materials. They had to go gather their own materials. Their time to spend worshiping those that was reduced more and more, and the physical demands were so much harder. But then you move forward to after the point of Moses building enough faith and courage and trust in them to leave and to become free again. They're out in the wilderness, and Moses escapes to Mount Sinai. As you can see in this image here, he's bringing down the commandments, but he's gone for several days, and they're waiting for him to return. They start to get concerned, and so they go to Moses' brother Aaron and ask him, ask him to create a God that they can pray to. And so, Aaron tells them to bring all their gold, and he creates the golden calf. It's such a fascinating story because you can reflect on it in so many different ways. And my daughter Isabel and I were actually talking about this just the other day, as we were having breakfast in the morning, about how the distancing there was that they needed a God to pray to, but yet their God was there. He had always been there. Just because Moses left didn't mean that they couldn't still pray. And the lack of support that they had in that faith for each other was also an important piece to make mention of. And so Moses comes down and asks them what they're doing, and of course God sees it and he wants to punish them, and Moses tries to have some dialogue with them. It's just it's an interesting part of the story. The second message on distancing comes later, fast forwarding to Jesus. And Jesus tells us during his mission work in Matthew 10, verses 34 to 36. I'm going to read this to you. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the enemies of his own household. I was reading that the other day, and I kind of started thinking, well, I hope I'm not the enemy in my household. Even though some days, my wife and kids might think that. I hope not. But, we can all get on each other's nerves. And, going back to the space analogies, that's where, taking countermeasures and having preventative measures in place to keep those group dynamics is so important. And I'm sure a lot of families, I've been reading about all the creative ways people have made use of their time. I was just finishing up a job yesterday, and I saw 3 boys out in the front yard next door shooting a bow and arrow at a target, and they were actually pretty good. I was pretty impressed. But one of the kids was making fun of his brother because he had the bow upside down before he shot, but he was still hitting the target. But it's neat because the ways of the world today that I think a lot of us agree aren't great for kids, but it's just where we're at with things. Those things have been removed, and kids are being forced to figure out how to entertain themselves and keep themselves busy in ways that we grew up just naturally doing. The only difference is that we weren't socially distanced in our neighborhoods. We, were able to get together with all our friends. But I think one of the neat things that's going to come out of this is that when this is lifted, everyone's going to be so grateful for their neighbors when maybe they were complaining about them before. I think they're going to be so grateful for their friends more than they ever were, that they're going to just cherish every moment with them. And I hope that doesn't wear off. That's one of the prayers I have for when this lifts, that we're in this long enough that we don't take anything for granted, including the breaths that we're given each day by the Lord. The third message on distancing I want to mention is, and this is from Jesus again. My daughter and I talked about this, and she brought this up, and I thought it was just amazing to share. And she mentioned Palm Sunday. Jesus is welcome. The crowds welcome him. The disciples are supportive. Life is good at this moment. Of course, Jesus knows it's about to get really rough. And from Palm Sunday to Good Friday, in just 5 short days, look at how those people changed. Look at how Peter changed. They distanced themselves from him. They wanted him crucified. They denied knowing him. The distancing that took place in just 5 days. And in just a short period of time, look at how the world has been distanced in so many ways as well. But at the same time, God takes the lemons, if you will, makes lemonade out of all this pain and sorrow, and He makes good. Peter denies Jesus 3 times. Jesus foretells him of it, and then after the resurrection, Jesus comes back. The I believe it's the second time that he sees the disciples, second or third. I'm sorry, I can't remember this exactly, but the second or third time Jesus sees the disciples and they're out fishing, and he tells them to cast the net out on the other side of the boat, and of course there's all the fish, and they know it's the Lord. Peter jumps in the water. Eventually the story leads to the disciples coming on the beach and they're sharing breakfast with him, and Jesus asked Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" And the third time it perturbs Peter. Well, the relevance of that is that it tells him 3 times because that's how many times Peter denied him, but he also foretells of Peter's death to come and how it will be painful, and it'll be in ways he doesn't want to do. But this distancing is healthy, because I think in a lot of ways people, if they haven't realized that they're not in control, I don't know what more we need to help us understand we're not in control. And for those of all of us that have, maybe did more time with the Lord, we've had it for 6 weeks, and we have more coming up still. And I hope we're using this time. The title of my talk was Facing Fears, and it's not an easy thing to do. We all have our fears. I remember growing up with a fear of snakes when I was a young boy. And I remember I held my first snake at Reptile Gardens out in South Dakota, Rapid City. And it was a big python, and I was terrified. But the only reason I wanted to hold it was because I didn't want to be afraid anymore. I'm still afraid of snakes, but I still pick them up once in a while. But the thing I think with fears that people have to understand is that most likely you may never get over your fear of something, but what you can get over is the ability of that fear to control you. And when you can teach yourself how to face fears and go after them, and pursue them, you encounter a lot of you faith. You find God in a lot of ways there. I know for me in my life, when I hit my turning point, when I became a business owner, I was in a really tough spot. I was being leveraged at work by a boss that didn't have any morals and ethics, and I prayed for him and even told him when he asked me why I was doing what I was doing, because I was putting myself deeper in the box. I looked at him and told him, "I'm trying to save your soul." I said, "Did you ever think that maybe God put me here at this place in time and let you do what you're doing to me just so I could help you see how far you've fallen? And I want to help you." And that hit him pretty hard. But then, of course, people go back to their ways. So how do we face our fears? What I found in my life, the more I face my fears, the more I've realized how to confront evil. That there's going to be suffering and persecution, but Jesus said, we wouldn't be alone, and He's right. And granted, it can feel like we're alone at times, but He's always there with us. He's always there to help us and to guide us. A couple of quotes of scripture that I want to mention in relation to facing our fears. In John 15, verse 8, Jesus spoke of the world's hatred and that the disciples would be persecuted as He would be soon. But He tells them not to be afraid. He even goes on in chapter 16 to say they will expel you from the synagogues. Now, if we really apply this to what's going on in the world around us, just look at what's happening. Bill did a great job referencing, church has been taken away, whether God did that or just let the natural free will of people subjecting themselves to more evil rather than to Him and His ways. We can go a lot of directions on that. It's pretty deep and heavy, but the idea I think he was referencing on that is that, they'll expel you from the synagogues. Well, that's leaders, it's all sorts of people, but we can't even go to church right now. And in some states, there's governors who have been arresting and citing people for trying to assemble. And this is kind of moving into the next, the final part of my talk here tonight, and that's on the U.S. Constitution and the Founding Fathers. And I had an interesting conversation with Alan, who actually lives in Canada. We were talking a little bit about this the other night as we were getting ready for this show, about just how how different living in a government structure like he has in Canada, and how, the structure we have in the States here. Not that ours is better, but moving into this a little bit, the founding fathers were amazing. Ken, if you can put a couple of those photos up. I'm going to actually move my table. Sorry, I'm outside of my porch and the sun's shifting. I keep getting a glare, so I do apologize for that. Um, I remember I was in surgery, not surgery for myself. I was in medical device sales, and I was a medical device sales rep. And I was covering a knee surgery with a physician here in Colorado Springs. And I was told not to talk to him. He didn't like anybody talking to him. And those of you that know me know I love to talk, so that wasn't going to happen. And I kind of broke the ice a little bit with him during surgery, and I could tell he was a little irritated. But I really wanted to get to know this guy. I wanted him to trust me. I wanted him to know that I wasn't just some rep that was there to make money. I cared about what he was doing. I was interested in his patients, the people that were in the room. And I said to him, I said, "What do you enjoy doing on your free time?" And he kind of stopped. He was in the middle of doing a total knee. And he stopped. He turned and looked at me. He goes, "I love Thomas Jefferson." And I said, "Really?" I said, "What do you love about him?" And he literally stops the surgery during tourniquet time, and he starts telling me all about what he loved about Thomas Jefferson. I said, "I love Thomas Jefferson too." He said, "Really? How so?" And I said, "Well, I did my graduate research and published my first paper in a professional journal using the Lewis and Clark expedition as an analog for considerations for future human missions to Mars." And he goes, "Really?" He goes, "What did you find?" I said, "Well, I really wasn't researching Jefferson. I was researching Lewis and Clark and the expedition and everything that was going on as I was reading their daily diaries. But what I learned as I was in this research is I kept learning more and more about Thomas Jefferson, and not so much just his brilliance as in his intelligence. He was such a future thinker. He was predicting things 20 years. I mean, he knew 20 years before the Louisiana Territory was to be purchased. He knew France was putting themselves in a position that they could get leverage to have to sell it to continue to finance a war because of all their military ego. And so, what I stumbled across with Jefferson was that he discovered, and his goal was to help other people, Americans that were, going to support the revolution in this new America, helping them discover their rights. And how he explained the rights weren't that, everybody just, should have these rights. It was that the discovery was that these rights were always there. They always belonged to humanity, but they were God-given rights, which, if you read the Declaration of Independence, it says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I mean, I think that pretty much sums up the importance of the creator. I mean, he gave us these rights. First of all, we have to recognize them, but then we have to understand how to fight and protect and defend them. And in the United States, we have a unique opportunity to push back and say no. If it goes against the Constitution, it's unlawful. Any law that is written that defies the Constitution will get overturned in courts. I mean, that's what the courts are designed to do, assuming that they do their job. But I want to share a few quotes of some of the founders that I was reflecting on here this week, and then Joe, if you have some questions, and if any callers, folks that are watching, want to ask some questions, and we have some time, we can do that as well. John Adams: "Our Constitution was made only for religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." I remember when I read that about a week ago, it was the first time I'd ever seen that quote. All I could think of was that, wow, do I dare share this publicly right now? I mean, to say that our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people, that's a very, very strong statement, especially the last part, when it's only made for a religious people. But if you think about it, the Constitution, it works, but it doesn't work well when people aren't religiously aligned. It doesn't mean that, but they have to be respectful of religious boundaries. When you have people that aren't religious, that aren't respectful of religious people, trying to apply the Constitution, it doesn't work. And you see these people, politicians, you hear people on Facebook, if you've posted any kind of opinion thread and seen some of the feedback, you can almost guarantee who, is and isn't of the faith. But, again, I have family and I have friends that don't practice faith anymore. And many of them are not attacking of religion. They're respectful of the fact that people have other belief systems. And that's what our Constitution was also designed to protect, is both the religious and the non. But it wasn't that we force a religion on people, and it wasn't that we take one away from those that want to have one. And the minute those things start to happen, that's the inadequacy of this government that John Adams talks about in this quote. Benjamin Franklin, this comes into virtues, and this was what Alan was talking about in his talk tonight. Only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. The virtues, the 7 Catholic virtues that that many Catholics know. I'm not going to get into the virtues with you here tonight, but consider ourselves as a society. Are we virtuous? If you go and you look up the virtues and read what they are, do we follow these? I mean, these are things that are pleasing to God. These are things that God's asked us to do. If we're not going to do these things, and we're not going to respect religion, then this Constitution is going to fall apart. And as someone once told me, I don't believe it, but his statement would be true, that the American experiment has failed. Well, it fails if we lose our morals and we lose our protection of these human rights that have been endowed by our Creator. So, I love tying the religion to our history and our founders and the Constitution, because to me, this last 6 weeks, even though I've been incredibly busy working and growing my business and trying to help provide work to all the people that have supported my business and that work with me, it's really been a religious and a patriotic reflection because of the times our founders went through. They were in a struggle. They were in a battle for freedom. They were about to engage in a war against the world's largest army. They basically told off the king in so many words. It was the Declaration of Independence. They knew there was a price on their head. I mean, I hear so many people telling me to be careful what I say, don't get in trouble, don't upset people. That's just not me. And people that know me well know I'm just not one to, zip my lips and be quiet. If it's not right, I'm going to speak it. And, we have to gain that courage.
I
and
think,
again,
Bill, I think, Matt, that a big part of being an American is our ability to speak out. And Ben Franklin told I think some woman asked him one time. I read this somewhere that what kind of government do we have now? And he says, well, we have a republic if you can keep it, meaning you're going to have to fight for it. It's not going to be easy. And like you said, it is a government for more moral people and religious people. And when the religion slides, this country will slide, as it has in so many other parts of the world. Look at some of the communist countries. Do you want everybody to be run by Kim Jong-un or China today? I don't think so. This is like the country that the only really major country left that is still run by the people. Sometimes we don't think that way, but compared to other countries, yes. And it's only going to be there, like you were saying, is if we fight for it.
absolutely.
We fought
the
American Revolution, and we have to fight that American Revolution today. We have to fight that all the time, because this
we don't want to
encourage
exactly. And when we say fight, for those listening, fighting isn't just picking up a gun and going out and creating a bloodbath with a battle. There's a lot of ways that you fight. You fight, the first things the leaders were trying to do is they were trying to send their complaints to the king, but he kept ignoring them. I think many of us have been doing that. I go up to the Capitol in Denver. I haven't gone this year. Obviously, things got cut short with the sessions, with the coronavirus, and so my opportunity this year passed me. But the last 3 years, I've gone up more and more each year, and I've voiced my opinion. I've won over the hearts of senators and congressmen and brought them down to where we live to talk with school district officials about how we can make our schools safer and put an end to this school shooting nonsense and all the things we've been advocating for to protect youth with our consulting work and the great group of guys that I've been fortunate to work with me and give me counsel mentoring and feedback. It was ironic when this virus hit. Every single thing we've been working towards to protect children was taken care of in one clean swoop. Kids aren't going to school. There's no more school shootings. Our kids are safe at school because they're at home. There's no more indoctrination. There's no more attack on religious beliefs through little slide-ins in the academics, even in the public education sector, because now everything's coming through online, and teachers wouldn't dare put anything on because parents that are paying attention wouldn't let it happen. But things can slide at school when they're there. Youth sports and a lot of the damage that even though sports are well intended, the opportunity often is missed to let sports be a mechanism to teach young boys, as an example, how to be better fathers, how to be good husbands when that day may come, if it comes for them, how to teach them how to be a good team player, how to listen, how to care about others before themselves. And as a former elite athlete, I'm very disappointed, and I'd even go as far as to say is very disgusted at times seeing what sports has turned into. It's turning kids into cash cows. It's turning, it's idolizing athletes that present their immoral compass. Not that it becomes something later down the road. I mean, they're that way, a lot of them from the get-go. And there's a lot of great athletes out there. Don't get me wrong, but it's just the whole point that we're missing the boat on what these things are meant to be for our children. They're supposed to, influence them in positive ways. They're supposed to encourage them to be good people. But, you lose you go back to John Adams' quote, you lose your morals. You lose, and where do you get your morals from? We get those from the commandments. We get those from God, whether we believe in God or not. You ask a person, why is it wrong to kill somebody, and they don't have a religious faith? Well, how do they know that? You step on plants all day long, you might go hunt. How do you know that that's wrong? It's a commandment. So you get into all these debates, you just go round and round with people. But the fact of the matter is that we have to really recognize, as Bill said, that we're being subjected to our own mess. We created this. God gave us free will. We've created it, and He's given us an opportunity to get out of it. And how we find that path is through prayer and discernment on letting Him show us individually where that path is. We all have a role to play in fixing things, if you will. And, to just deny it and try to use, our human common sense, if you will, our intelligence to fix it, we're just going to create a bigger mess. We've got to let Him guide, take the reins, and recognize He's in control, and He'll guide us.
Very good. Right. That's Matt, excellent talk tonight. There's so much there. We could go on for another hour just trying to decipher all that you were saying, but that's terrific. Praise God. The main thing is that this country can be a great country. Any country can be a great country if the people are Christ-centered and following Christianity. I believe, because that to us is, of course, the truth, the real truth. Hey, I want to just stick with the time. We said we were going to wrap it up at 9 o'clock, and I want to thank you again for a great talk. I want to thank all of our speakers tonight. Al Smith out of Canada. We had to go all the way to Canada to find him. And Bill Parsons out of Cleveland, and of course Matt out of Colorado Springs. And that scenery behind you just looks fantastic, so I kind of envy you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We're very blessed. We love it here.
Yeah, you got it. Okay, God bless you.
Thanks again, Joe.
I think we're thank you, Matt. Thank you again. God bless.
Joe, I'm just gonna say thank you for everybody watching on Facebook, on Joe Miller's YouTube channel, and Patrick Hart. And we were also on Podbean and airing on TuneIn over at Patrick Hart. So thank you for everybody watching tonight. It was a lot of conversation, so great job to everybody. I just wanted to say thanks to everybody also in the chat room for watching all night. So there you go.
And Ken, thanks to you too for maneuvering all of this. You had the tough part. You had to think about it for a minute. Just with the new technology we have, we're going to another country. We're going to the West Coast. We're going to Cleveland. you're coordinating all of that with the technology. So it's really amazing, and we hope to do some of this again very soon.
Yep. Okay. Well, till then, we'll wrap it. And thanks for coming on. We'll hopefully do another one. We'll have everything on our Fiat Ministry YouTube channel. You can definitely watch all the talks over again. Have the whole conference on the YouTube channels. And please subscribe to actually subscribe to Joe Miller's show on the YouTube, and also Patrick Hart. And make sure to check out all the websites. They were underneath all the speakers, Al and Matt's. Bill will get a website someday. I think he'll get one. But until then, we will call it a night, and God bless. And we'll see you.
Good night, everybody.
Patchwork Heart Ministry and Fiat Ministry Network invite you to discover your mission. A brand new in-depth monthly video series featuring engaging Catholic speakers who will challenge you to live your life abundantly. For only $25 a month, you will receive a personal monthly mission, including 3 full-length inspirational talks that build upon a new theme each month. Sign up for the Discover Your Mission tier at patreon.com/patchworkheartministry today.